You mentioned that there's this tip of the iceberg that's being explored, but that leaves the whole underneath the iceberg unexplored, and you weren't a fan of that. So the tip of the iceberg, I imagine, is just stating that there are some objects in the sky that are of unknown origin and in some nuts and bolts manner. And further down in the iceberg is cattle mutilations and abductions, etc. So if it is the case that there are government recognized abductions and government recognized cattle mutilations, etc., then would it not be like one has to start investigating from some perspective. So there's always going to be some tip of the iceberg that's just there. And when feeding a squirrel, you go, "Hey, do you want a little nut?" Like you don't go, "Hey, do you want a nut?" Or like when courting a girl, a woman, you don't ask, "Can I marry you?" right from the get-go. You say, "Okay, do you want that? That's a nice painting. What do you think of that painting?" You're like super indirect about it. So in some ways, this indirect is like, okay, well, there has to be some natural entry point. Do you feel that we're not at the natural, that there's a superior entry point?
That's another excellent question. And it all depends on how we perceive the motivations of those people who actually have access to the information and are parceling it out. So if we were to assume the best of intentions on the part of our governing structure, I would say that this very, very slow acculturation is probably a smart approach. I've spoken to a number of other folks who are very closely associated with some of these efforts, and I think some of them have good motivations, and I think this is what they believe. It's like, look, you can't tell the public everything at once, which is kind of what you're implying here. And I think we all agree with that. The reality of what we are talking about is undoubtedly of such a profoundly different kind of understanding of life, the universe, everything, as Douglas Adams put it. It's such a radically different understanding that, yes, we would want to go slowly. The question that I guess I keep asking is that actually the motivation, or is it more just delay forever? And I do suspect it's the latter. I don't believe that there's an actual disclosure plan that the United States government really is promoting. I think that there is a disclosure plan that a few members of Congress have offered to put out there. Whether that's going to go anywhere, though, is a wholly different question. So my feeling, my guess, if I could just say that, is that this process will be dragged out for 50 years or 100 years or for 500 years if they could do it, drag it out that long. In other words, the idea is it's too much of a liability for government agencies to truly come clean on this. There's just too many questions. If we have that is an engaged public that's willing to ask the questions, so if you have a genuine disclosure, people will want to know, how did you manage to fool us for so long? What does that say about the institutions that we're supposedly trusting in? Our media, have you controlled our media? How about our politicians? Have you blackmailed or controlled our politicians or our academic institutions? Like, all of them would be complicit, and all of them would have there'd be a lot of repercussions as a result of that. So there's that. And then on top of that, simply the question of, what does it say about hidden technology that you have? Can we have some of this hidden tech? Do you have free energy? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't want it to release the free energy for all kinds of reasons that they might consider legit. They may lose money because if they own, huge swaths of the petroleum industry, there's that. But there's also just the disruption, global disruption. I think these are things that they fear. Any kind of dramatic changes. So no, I just have this sense that that there's not going to be a genuine, honest disclosure. But you just look at the United States. When has the United States government ever truly been honest about anything? I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult here, but the United States government
lies about literally every single thing of importance. Why should this be any different? So I have very little faith or trust in the governing institutions to think that they're going to be acting in the interests of the people. I don't think they act in the interests of the people in much of anything that I could think of. So, but in general, I would say yes. If you've got this huge secret, you want to parcel it out bit by bit, but they're really not doing that. They're not parceling it. Anything that's come out has been against their wishes, not as part of a plan. You have a faction within some members of the classified community. That is true. A lot of them are retired, some are not retired, and they have always believed in some greater level of information coming out on this subject. That has always been the case. That's been the case for decade after decade and generation after generation. There's always been such people. And it just so happens that they have had enough success in the last few years to get some of their message out there. That does not mean that this is a is formally sanctioned by the actual United States government, the actual powers that be. I don't believe that has been. So you're basically just looking at a battle that's going on within the national security apparatus, and we're seeing that battle play out to some extent in the public realm. But to say that what we're looking at is a part of a long-term disclosure plan by the government, I would disagree with. I don't think that's what we're seeing. Yeah, I think they're continuing to resist. Basically, I think the strongest powers in the government are still resisting any kind of genuine disclosure.
If you enjoyed this Toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core Toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.